As promised, I am trying to visit all the wartime underground factories of Germany of the time, even if they are just train tunnels. Some of them are far more interesting than others, but it will give you all a very good idea of how complex underground bunkers and facilities were constructed on one hand, and how simple they were made on the other. By simply sealing off a train tunnel through a mountain or a hill, you have a ready-made safe place to work, and all you have to do is set up the construction line. Today we're going to visit two of these, Maise 1 and the armored factory of Kaus. Both are radial tunnels in south-central part of Germany. Now, as I'm trying to navigate through poor GPS coordinates and blurry old maps and directions, I want to give you all a tool that might make it a little easier for you to understand how these German facilities were labeled and categorized. It'll be easier for you in the future from the names or code names to identify what exactly type of facility these were. I'm going to go over the aliases of the different underground relocations so you can discern from the name of what type of facility it was. Anyway, it all started with Organization Tod. It was founded in 1938 and used for construction work within Germany and the areas occupied by Germany. In 1943, Xavier Dorsch was Albert Speer's deputy and thus the head of the Tod organization. By the end of the war, the OT had built some countless air raid shelters. They've cleared hundreds of bombed cities, built 4 lines of defense, numerous traffic routes, flak towers, railway routes, and 15 separate Führer headquarters, and around 1,000 underground relocations within the German Reich. In the summer of 1943, air raid shelters for the civilian population in the Reich was being built. Also, the construction of bomb-proof underground relocations for the armament factories in the Third Reich began. The OT was broken down into administrative offices, various office groups, and various local task forces. Important to note is the Tod organization did not belong to the Wehrmacht, they didn't belong to the party, or the Reich Building Administration, although it was given authority like management within the framework of the Reich Ministry for Armaments and War Economy towards the end of the war. The OT itself was not an authority, but acted independently. This did lead to a whole lot of conflicts with the above-mentioned areas, because the Wehrmacht and the German Labor Front, DAF, saw their influence dwindle more and more, especially since more and more staff was contracted and transferred to the OT. So we're looking at the Reich Ministry for Armaments and War Economy as the key here. The labor deployment of forced laborers was handled by Fritz Saucker, who had been in office since 1942. He recruited the workers for Speer's ministry, also for General Hans Kammler, who was responsible for the construction of many of the underground armaments productions and factory facilities. He and Speer worked closely together. Because of the increasing air raids, the Speer ministry, in consulting with Hitler and Göring, increasingly relied on the reallocation of armaments factories to bomb-proof tunnels. The Reich Minister for Armaments and Munitions, Armaments Office, in agreement with the Armaments Delivery Office, was responsible for the overall planning of the underground relocations of operations or parts of operations that was important to the war effort. You clearly see bureaucracy have a place here. Now, ordering the transfer of a factory or industry for underground relocation required the approval of the Armaments Office. A relocation order in relation to the reallocating company and the receiving company were arranged accordingly to specific patterns by means of special relocation notices. The weapons office of the Wehrmacht branches, the SS, the Reichsbahn, the armament companies themselves, or other leading bodies could be subject to relocation. So how did this actually work? I'll try to break it down, not sounding like a bureaucrat doing it. The relocation decision obliged the companies, amongst other things, to the following measures. Accelerate buildup of backup capacity. Plans for a permanent maintenance and an increase in contingency capacity if the Reich made the demand. the greatest possible protection of the previous stock of the allocated underground facility and its structures, and that the company would evacuate the facility again if the Reich so made the demand. The receiving company was obligated to start the transfer of operations to enable it to continue production to the extent required on the basis of the transfer notice. Upon request, compensation for damage was granted by the Reich. This was reimbursed to the relocating company for any expenses or damages that arose as a result of relocation. So if they broke something moving, the Reich would actually reimburse them. The receiving company, receiving of the allocation notice was granted compensation for unavoidable expenses, ongoing additional costs, and loss of income. It was business after all. Additional funds were reimbursed for costs required to resume original production after the termination of the occupancy relationship. In other words, they would also be compensated when they had to move back home to their original factory site, expectedly after the war was over. Cooperation between the companies were sought, especially if the companies with different types of production would occupy the same underground space, and a lease agreement should regulate the transfer of the facilities. In the process of underground relocations of industrial plants, the Reich Ministry of Armaments and War Economy played a central role. All reports from the cave tunneling staff, which were researching the suitable subterranean cavities throughout the empire, went directly to the Reich Ministry Administration Center. The armaments companies also sent their requirement report directly to the Reich Ministry. When the bomb-proof caves or tunnels were assigned to the companies, there was a long list on which the importance of the respective companies were noted. The Jäger program, the V-Weapons program, the Kessler program, the Geilberg program, as well as the repair programs had top priority on this list. All other armor programs, such as the tank construction and infantry program, came in secondary. All of these were listed and given different aliases depending on where they moved, what type of underground facility they were given, and what kind of production they had. So basically, the breakdown of how this worked was, we are talking about German, Czech, Austrian companies that were deemed important enough for their production to be safeguarded from Allied bombings. They would submit an application for underground relocation. If this was granted to them, a location, or tunnel, or cavity was found underground for them, they would be reimbursed, their insurance would be reimbursed, any losses or damages would be reimbursed by the Reich, both for their transfer, their re-establishing the industry underground, and their return to their previous site or another site after end of the use of the underground location would also be reimbursed by the Reich. It does seem that Speer, with Hitler and Göring, had the final say in which ones of these were the most important to the Reich at the time. Obviously, the special factories, the special locations, the V programs, and those under Kammler had top priority, and therefore were allocated the best, the largest, the fastest setups, and of course the majority of the labor if they so needed. Now, after that bit of bureaucratic speak, let's go take a look at one of these tunnels, and go for a walk through that, get some fresh air, and then I'll break down the aliases of these underground factories. And just like so many other underground factories, this one utilized railway tunnels that were existing at that time. And you can clearly see I'm walking on what used to be a railway track. Put a little bike path here, and you see along the side of the road you still have the stones from when it was a railway. I don't know if this was just a reinforcing wall or there was a building outside here. Well, at least one of the tunnels are open, I can see. Turn into a bike path. And here you have these two tunnels. The tunnels were constructed around the turn of the century. Well, that was the previous century.
So they were already some 44 years old at the time of World War II. In 1944, when the Allied bombing was really taking its toll on German industry, some 400 forced laborers showed up here. These looks like the old railroad crossbeams, but not from the time of the war. This was in use until 1984. At least they weren't destroyed, as why indeed should they have been. They were here way before the war and were just utilized like so many hundreds of other tunnels. If I can find any photos of the supporting buildings here, it's doubtful. And the tunnel next to us is sealed because of bats, of course. And a typical note for out here, from the little sign that talks about the tunnel and its history and size, there's absolutely no mention of its wartime use for producing jet aircraft, or the forced laborers that worked here. I see the roofs are nicely cemented. There's drainage, but of course this road has been put in here post-war. But 750 meters of industry. And just like the tunnels, the cross tunnels we're used to seeing hammered into the rock face. This is the naked rock face. So there didn't appear to be any cross tunnels between the two. So there's not much to see from the time. It has been very neatly sanitized, I will say, for lack of a better term.
Now this tunnel factory is a good example on exactly how a U-relocation worked. In the town nearby, the Hohmann Company, here in Wuppertal, they needed a safe place from bombing, and they were lucky that a tunnel could be found right nearby, where they were already established with their factory, so the workers could remain in their homes and just travel to work in the tunnel when it was set up. The company originally made cookers and ovens, but they were retooled in 1940 for the Luftwaffe producing bombs. In February 1944, Willy Hohmann, the head of the company, and Field Marshal Erich Milch from the Jägerstab, they agreed that the company should start building Me-262s here in the tunnel in safety, and they were referred for U-relocation here. The site management of the shear tunnel construction site were taken over by the OT task force Hansa from Essen. The aim of their work in the tunnel was to create a production area of 8,000 square meters in order to build Me-262s. First, the tracks were removed of those in the eastern tunnel. The floors of the shear tunnel was poured with cement and leveled, raised a bit, to guarantee the safe standing of machines. A barrack camp was built for the forced laborers and the quarry in front of the north portal. Steel girders were used to hang up bridge cranes, which extended through the entire tunnel section. This was followed by the construction phase for the energy supply and the ventilation of the tunnels. At both ends of the tunnels, the alternative bays on the opposing sides were connected, and the fans for ventilation of the underground factory was built into them. At the end of the construction work, the offices between the tunnels and the alternate bays for precision engineering were expanded. Also kitchens were placed in there. The design offices and the factory parts control center were all located in two connecting corridors and the adjoining rooms between the two tunnels. The two rooms and the pillars between the tunnels are each about 100 meters from the entrance portal to the tunnel. The west tunnel was the only used to unload and load components for the fighter planes. A transformer station was housed approximately in the middle of the east tunnel. It transformed the high voltage current down to 220 or 380 volts. The location of the transformer station can also still be seen today, as can certain other parts of the other tunnel, the one that they have so conveniently closed off as a bat preserve at the very time I'm here visiting.
I would imagine there would be blockers at the end of the tunnels in case there was a bombing outside. The blast wouldn't travel inside the tunnels. There are very few photographs of this place, so it's very hard to tell. It's not hard for a fighter bomber to follow a train track to a tunnel. It's just a thought. So there must have been a blocking wall. Of course the rails were not running. I just wondered, there must have been something out here to block the entrance.
The code names selected for the underground relocations were formed accordingly to the following provisions. Underground factories in shafts and deep tunnels, or those from mining, were given animal names, mostly mammals such as hedgehog, mule, or horse. Underground relocations in slope tunnels or rock cellars, mining, air raid protection, were given names of fish or amphibians, such as perch, minnow, toad, and so on. All the names, of course, are in German. Underground relocations in traffic tunnels were given birds' names, such as birch-finked, goldhammer, pheasant, partridge. Underground relocations into the fortress works by using such as the Maginot Line forts or abandoned or conquered forts were given plant names, such as chestnut, lily of the valley, so on. Underground relocations into caves were given coin names, such as Krone, Hella, Sestesi. Underground relocations in bunkers were given male first names, such as Paul, Peter, or Valentine, such as the large U-boat bunker that we will visit. Underground relocations into brewery cellars were given female names, first names, such as Lisa, Meta, Nanny. Underground relocations dug into new galleries were named from geology, such as arsenic, albert, amber, melanite, sigalite. Projects, the first waves of underground relocations moving into existing caves, such as the Reichbahn tunnels, mines, or caves, repairs, and finally assembly, were given numbers starting with A, A1, A2, A5, A7, so forth, like the one we're seeing today. B projects, which were the second wave of construction, underground relocations into new galleries, suppliers of industry, completed plants, developments, and the Geilberg project, B1, B2, B3, you get the idea. C projects of the second wave of constructions were underground relocations of the Geilberg project. They made gasoline, chemicals, gas, paint, and oil systems. So, C1A, for instance, U-shift iron gravel, C3A, U-shift para, C11C, U-shift for smoky quartz. The D projects of the second wave were underground relocations of energy, water, and air systems, as well as underground loading systems, material stores, or explosive chambers. S projects, special construction measures such as the Führerhauptquartier submarine bunkers, command centers, or tank farms. These are important. There was another alias scheme in the mineral, oil, and security plant under the direction of Edmund Geilberg, the so-called Geilberg program. Here the individual projects were given a further code name or project name depending on the type of relocation within the chemical industry. They could be pure production facilities, but also research centers, or laboratories, for the development of new technologies. For example, that of synthetic fuel production. Here's a selection of some of the aliases of the Geilberg program that I'm not expecting you to memorize. They were, for instance, Beaver was linol plant, Badger was lube oil refinery, Bohr was an oxygen facility, Itis precision distillery plant, Jacob was a simple crackling plant. Carp was a gas plant. Misa, catalytic crackling plant. Oven, distillery plant. Raven, tetraethyl lead plant. So you see, there's no rhyme or reason specifically that denotes what these names are, except they are not listed as above: birds, people, girls' first names, and so on, so it's a little easier to break down what was what. There's other important armament programs, such as the Jäger program, under which all branches of industry important to the war effort for aircraft production were combined, or the Kessler program, which were intended to maintain ball bearing production. Now, simply listing these as a reference guide makes it a little hard to gain overview, so I'll write them down and post them in a simple, overviewable form on my website and on the Patreon, of course. But I hope it helps you gain a little bit of insight when you come across names of tunnels or construction projects, or you see papers or references. It's a little easier to figure out what they were from the name. A little.
Sometimes it takes a little bit of looking, and I'm looking at the map, and the GPS coordinate I got was wrong. Well, they built planes in this tunnel, and now I'm trying to find it. I think it's in the tunnel that's over here, but the GPS I got was wrong, so we'll make our way down a bit of jungle, and there's something shining over there, and people working in a quarry. Tunnels and quarries usually go together, but I was looking for a train, quite honestly. Somewhere down there, something looks like a tunnel entrance, and the lady said I should be careful because once a dog fell in a hole here. It's always nice when people walking their dogs. They'll tell you what to watch out for. And this is the boring bits of history that I don't really share with you guys. There's a lot of the research is time consuming, and a lot of the actual finding the location is somewhat time consuming and involves a lot of crawling up and down mountains. Well, there's an edge there on foobar, but let's take a look. Well, if you ask me from looking up here, I'm standing on the roof of a tunnel. Certainly something down there. And I'm not entirely sure how best to get there. I don't think crawling down this, whatever that is an option. So I'm afraid it is up and around. Damn it. But that's definitely the lead into a train tunnel. Yep. There's the tunnels. Sitting in there, which kind of blows because I'm up here, and now I know I'm on the right track, because here's one valley separated by this large ridge, and down there is the tunnel that is now decommissioned. I had no idea that would be separated by such a large valley here. So both of these tunnels were used for airplane production during the war. And of course, one was closed or never reopened. Alright. So I'm going down there, and there's the new tunnel. Well, it's not new, but it's still in use. And here, the entrance of this valley, you can see all the brickwork. And down here is a platform as well. I'm imagining all this was pre-war. It'll be interesting to see how far inside the tunnel we can get and see if there's anything in there since it's not in use. Alright, I'm honestly still wondering how to get down. That probably used to be a staircase. I can see through this tunnel. And it's supposed to be a lot longer. So I wonder if... Well... Yeah, this looks like the way down. See, the fun part about doing this alone is... Well, that was the climb down. Down here's the tunnel. So before I start worrying about how I'm going to get out of here, let's explore this place. Not entirely sure how to get out of here, I'll be honest. But, history first, and we solve that problem later. And I'm guessing, if you're watching this, I figured a way out. Wow. All these underground airplane factories were named after birds. This was named after Meise, which is, well, a tit. On the other side, the tunnel next to me was where the actual assembly of the aircraft took place, while this one was used to ensure labor to and from, materials, workflow, everything of that nature would come through here. So all the aircraft production they could possibly cram into tunnels, they did. And I will say this is a gorgeous postcard photo. But take a look at this. What a gorgeous place. Truly. Alright. So, we have this that I'm not entirely sure what does, but it's wartime. There's none on the other side. There's rebar sticking out of the top of it. It's not a buttress for the wall's not going anywhere. Well, this seems to be a place you can certainly explore in peace and quiet. Not like anyone's gonna come down here, not to check on you, not to check on this. Maybe one day somebody's gonna wonder why there's a rental car abandoned up there. The things you would hide in a rock. 1879. Schweitzer tunnel, 742. You know, it doesn't look like 742. Honestly. Emblems of the German railways. Ah, this is gorgeous. Dude, this is gorgeous. This predates World War II by a mile. You got at least some 30 meters of rock above it. I'm imagining that was bricked up after the war. And there are the little alcoves like we're used to seeing. This was used as a rail tunnel after the war, which makes it a little harder to find anything, period, because they probably laid down a cement floor at the time they had production here, and that would have been covered up with everything that might be laying on it at the time they reintroduced trains here. So the plates covered either technical access or drainage. There's a lot of space in the train tunnel, I will say. This is a good choice for an underground installation, a factory. It is certainly not going anywhere. You're not going to focus no matter what I do on that, are you? Alright. Just more of the access panels. You see those a lot in any tunnel system. Here's something that's bricked up. Well, I mean, I'll be an idiot for trying to open it. It's closed. There's probably just a small room in there anyway. There were two rail tracks parallel to each other here. That you can definitely tell. Well, let's see if I can get out and up on this way. If you look at the large arch here, it looked like, well, it's strange because there's only rock face behind it. And the other tunnel must be quite a distance from here. Looks like that was dug out with hand tools, pickaxes. But the interesting thing is, from when this was designed as a train tunnel, there's no ventilation for a cold train vent. If the train was ever to sit in here or go through, all the smoke would have to come with it because this not any roof ventilation or evacuation for all the smoke like we see in Poland for what was suggested to be a train tunnel redesigned for Hitler's train. Just a note of interest. Now the original tunnel, of course, were made in stone, and then for the wartime production it was probably given an extra layer of plaster with a thin layer of rebar just to hold it together. I have never seen that before, but that is clearly what this looks like. Whereas down here, this is not just a patch, this is the tunnel. And just for a train to come through here, well, you wouldn't need that, the stone would be fine. But if you're storing mechanicals, bits and pieces for aircraft, you would want it dry. So that's what they did. Again, the plates for the technical tunnels. I actually have no idea where I'm going to come out. That'll be fun. Coming to the other side of the tunnel. It's almost a kilometer long. It doesn't look that way when you stand at one end of it. You can store a lot of stuff in here. I will say that. I'll also say these rock faces look even worse than the other ones. I may have to go all the way back and scale the mountain. Alright, one more World War II underground factory documented. Now, for the more pertinent questions, where the hell am I and where's the car? Oh.
Behind me is Wernher von Braun's first test stand. Down the road is Dietmar's nuclear reactor. Over there is the Maginot Line and all its amazing forts. I'm visiting them all and I'm bringing them to you. So I really appreciate you like, follow, and share what I'm doing, trying to document all these important historical locations. And if you feel like you want to watch more pictures or documents that I use for these, go to lostbattlefields.com. And if you feel like helping me out with my travels, because gasoline and travel and airfare is expensive, my PayPal is there, protectionserviceinc.com. You are more than welcome, but you don't have to. I appreciate all your support and all your help, and I love seeing these locations, and I love bringing them to you.